All right, let's try this one more fucking time. Uh, there's
Go.
your intro. What's up, Lit Punks? Welcome to Punks in the Library. I'm NJ Sullivan, and our guest today is a writer and educator and also an Irishman, but we're not going to hold that against him. Conor Bredin. Did I get that right that time?
Hey,
Did I
you
get
got
it
it
right
right
that
that
time?
time. Well
All
done. I'm
right.
so proud, Nick.
And it's very interesting that I am entirely burned out right now just from the setup for this podcast, and we're going to be talking about burnout. So
It just suits. It's like this is
it
the warm up.
absolutely does. It absolutely does. Burnout is one of those things that, like, I don't know a single person in any field who hasn't gone through it, but it seems to hit creatives harder somehow. I
Yeah,
don't know why.
I think that's because I think it's because creatives there's not a definitive box to tick to be like, oh, I've done that job, or oh, I'm successful now. You
Yeah,
know,
that's an interesting. Yeah,
because
and
like
there's no. This is the time I leave work. Really.
yeah,
Yeah.
or more importantly, this is the time I start work, I leave work. Like it's all
Yeah, it kind
like
of
it's
blends into your entire life,
yeah, and you
which
have to let
is
it not take over.
yeah, which is. I mean, I've had people ask me how do I deal with burnout, and I mean, I have to be completely honest and say I haven't dealt with burnout in years. I just let it keep going. You know,
I'm always burning out.
yeah, that's my secret, Cap. I'm always burned out.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, in a lot of ways, it's true. And with the events in my personal life, in Solosia and I's personal life over the past few months, it's
Mm,
become so obvious how close to the edge of that I was. Which
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
glad that you suggested this as a topic because I know you've had some personal events in your life that kind of pushed you that far as well. You don't have to discuss them, obviously,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, but you
Well,
have a
I think that's
similar
the thing though.
experience with that level of
Everyone has though, and I think, like you said, it does hit creative people harder, and I think that's because, like, so for example, you mentioned earlier, I am a primary school teacher here in Ireland, which means I teach K through grade 9. Yeah,
grade
so we
9. That
like
would be freshman in high school in America.
okay, maybe a
So
bit lower.
14
Grade
years old.
7. No, grade 7 then. 2 years
Okay,
younger.
okay,
So like, because I know in America you guys have 3 school systems. You have elementary, middle, and high school, whereas in Ireland we
yeah,
only have 2. So
okay. Some places in
we kind
America
of
are that way as
halfway
well.
through middle school they go to secondary school basically.
And Solosia's school, one of the schools she went to, it was K through 12,
Yeah,
all in the same building, and in some
yeah,
cases the same room.
yeah. It's very
So,
intense.
well, she grew up on a farm. So,
But like with teaching, we're the day we're recording, dear listeners, is my first day of my summer holidays. So like with teaching, yeah, I do get burned out with teaching too, but at least there's always and now there's no kids in your life for the next 2 months. So,
yeah.
but again, with creatives, like, I mean, I remember the day after I published my first book, um, I was like, okay, but now I have to start marketing it, and now I have to do this, and oh, I have to
Yeah.
there's no summer holidays for creatives unless you
No.
really force it on yourself.
And you have to, and every creative I know, writer, storyteller, musician, artist, it's something they have to force themselves to do.
Hmm.
Like you have to actually say, you have to basically lock all of your equipment away so you
Yeah.
can't touch it because otherwise you absolutely will. And it can get really dangerous. You know, I think burnout is a big part of the reason that people in creative fields tend to have higher levels of mental illness.
Oh yeah,
You know,
definitely.
and
Definitely.
addiction issues and alcoholism issues and marriage issues,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
across the board. We just don't know how to switch off because there's no off switch for your brain. Well, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
there is, but it's hard drugs and alcohol, and you run into the
But
same
that's
problem
not.
there.
But that's not even an off switch. That's a I'm going to look away from the switch for the however long this
Yeah,
substance is coursing through my system, and then once you're sober again or whatever, it's
yeah.
there's the switch again, and I'm ignoring it and
It's
still
not
not
a
trying to get out.
vacation. Creatives don't really get that
Yeah.
break because so much of what we do is internal.
Hmm.
That even if I'm not writing a script or a story, I'm thinking about a script or a story or an idea or marketing or, or I'm surrounded by other people who are working in the same field I am. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing about theirs.
Or even worse, when you're not doing any of those things, you're feeling guilty about not doing them.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was going to be the next point I brought up. So because it's not going to get played, I would like to point out that we were supposed to start this podcast an hour before we did. And it was entirely down to me getting settings wrong in Discord that didn't happen, and multiple phone calls, and
It was very
it was
funny.
just all over the place, man. Like,
It's
oh,
as I said, it's just, and I wouldn't mind, but dear listeners, here's a little bit of behind the scenes action. I actually requested we move the recording time 2 hours up because of other stuff going on, and like I have friends that want to do something. I was like, oh, maybe Nick could be nice and move the recording time. It was like, good thing we did.
yeah, no kid. Actually, the thing is, we probably wouldn't have had all those interruptions early on
Yeah,
because
we
all the
probably
stuff
would.
that
Yeah,
interrupted us would have happened before we started. Oh,
nothing ever goes perfectly.
no,
Um,
absolutely not. I was making the joke. That's why I block out an hour and a half for a 45-minute recording, because if it takes an hour and a half, we're lucky.
yeah.
That's part of DIY, man. You got to expect shit to go wrong.
So here I have a question for you though. Now, putting aside your like we'll say pre the chaotic events that you've been going through lately, how did you avoid or cope with burnout? Like I know you kind of just said you didn't, but like you were
I,
maintaining yourself in some way.
I, I mean, it may be different for me because my psychology is different than most people's. Because I do have autism, I coped by working on a different thing.
Oh, okay.
Like, but the
So
thing
that's
was,
legitimate.
like, I would be working on a story and I'd be like, man, I'm really getting burned out working on this story. I'm going to set it aside. And then I'd set it aside and work on a different story.
Hmm.
I coped, but it was really, I was a lot closer to the edge than I thought I was.
Hmm.
And, with, with Celosia having her health issues, over the past few months, and me having to put everything else aside temporarily to be able to handle that, I realized how much of my life and how much of Celosia refers to it as my spoons or her spoons.
Yeah.
I call it bandwidth. She calls it spoons. But how many spoons? How much of my bandwidth? Like how close I was to overloaded,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
all the time. And I would never say that health issues are a good thing, but going through that,
It does make you readjust and reevaluate, though.
exactly. It went from, oh, I have to work, I have to write, I have to record, to now I want to again. And I needed that break. And not only do I want to, but I don't want to as much, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to have
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
7 or 8 ongoing stories that I have to do every week, like I was doing. I want to pace myself and, have the energy and have the bandwidth to enjoy other things in my life, which I wasn't doing. So how do you cope with the burnout?
I quit. No, this is actually why I suggested it, because so like for anybody who is interested, NJ and I know each other because well, we kind of randomly connected through TikTok or Twitter or something like that as fellow creatives pushing our wares into the world. But then I actually can't remember. Did you ask to come on to my podcast, or
I
did I
think
invite
you
you? It was
invited
one or the
us.
other. And
I remember a lot of
I
your
think I
mic is
did,
still
yeah.
live.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Oh, I understand. And I'm surprised I'm not getting it in return right now, honestly.
I won't lie. I was talking about rubbing the mic earlier. I might do it every now and then just to wind you up. Just getting my revenge. But so like NJ and Celosia were this is me talking to your listener, were my first duo guests on the show. And it was great, and I loved doing my podcast. It was called Story of a Storyteller, and you might notice I'm speaking about it in the past tense because I just, it was a thing of, I started it during 2020 when schools were closed, when COVID hit, and I had the time, I had the bandwidth, I had the space. That's what I call it. My term is my space. How much space do I have in my day? And there was another guest that I had on whose advice I kind of hear echoing in my head all the time. There was Dixon Rule, who
she is actually going to be on the show.
She said she read,
and now I have to run this episode before hers.
Haha! I get to go first, Eve. Look at that. But she said once in one of the episodes I had her on that you only get to do one thing. Like, whether that be podcasting or writing or
whatever your creative thing is,
going to the gym, or you only get to do one thing and do it well. And I remember when I was getting to the point where, like, I was stressed out because I was like, oh, I haven't written anything in weeks, and I have this guest tomorrow and I have this guest tonight, and I haven't edited Monday's episode yet. And I was kind of like, I started the podcast as my Story of a Storyteller podcast as a way of content marketing my writing career. Of being like, here's a podcast, I hope you like it, and by the way, I have a book. And it did work. I did get a few sales through the podcast because I had ways of tracking that. But the podcast was supposed to be, I'm a writer who has a podcast, and it became I was a full-time podcaster and a full-time teacher, and I sometimes wrote, and that is not what I wanted to be.
You had to. That's how I. That's actually similar to what I was saying earlier about I can't have 7, 8, 9 projects going at one time. I can't do Dark Lantern and Lantern Radio and Lantern News and write my book and do this all at the same time. And have a life.
And have a life. And have a wife. And have a personal and friends.
There is not enough space, literal space for it. There's not enough hours in the day, for one thing. And that's part of the reason that I kind of, when we decided to bring this show back, when we decided to bring Punks back, it's part of the reason that we changed the format and we didn't use an interview format because it involves so much less prep. This is just two people in the same field having a conversation about a topic. The furthest I go with prep is, sometimes I write down bullet points in case we run out of things to talk about.
You're not going to have that problem with Irish guests.
I'm glad I've got a few, I'm hitting the Welsh and the Irish kind of early on.
Yeah. To warm yourself up.
And, but that's part of the reason that we decided to go this route with it rather than a traditional interview type setting. It's low impact on my life. Now, there is some impact because, organizing a group of writers is harder than herding cats, quite honestly.
As someone who once had to herd cats,
But the thing is, I knew that going into it because I've done live storytelling streams with, at one point we had 10 writers on one of our live streams, and they all had to have things in on deadline. They all had to, had to go through tech checks and all of that stuff. And I've dealt with that before. This is actually way easier than that was, because all I'm having to do with this is like make sure that the person is ready on the day. That's it. And make sure that we both have the same day and time.
All you need. So what are what are you gonna do now? Because to avoid burnout, because you've said you thought you were avoiding burnout by hopping
Yeah.
From one project to the next.
Well, because I'm acting in a home healthcare, scenario at the moment, I have to avoid it. And interestingly enough, doing this podcast and doing, my audio dramas is a part of avoiding burnout, because my burnout is coming from dealing with hospitals and dealing with the government and, all these, basically learning a new job on the job. And so this is kind of I wouldn't call it a hobby, because I do want, like, especially the audio drama stuff, I'd love for that
It's
to
your
be my
passion.
career. Yeah, it's my passion. And getting to do this now is my free time. And that has changed my perspective on what I'm doing with my shows too. I'm still writing on Brimstone, and I've got a couple other shows that are going to be going up on Lantern Radio. But just to keep things coming out, I started doing Lantern News, and I don't know if you've heard any of Lantern News.
I have, yeah. I love it.
Getting to have fun with it, not taking it so seriously, not going, if this isn't a success, my life is worthless, like I used to do. Because there's more important shit to deal with in the day. My fun should be fun. So I'm going to enjoy this, and I'm not going to consider it life and death every time an episode comes out. I'm just going to enjoy it. And especially, I'm going to be having a conversation with another guest about this, but social media is a big part of what causes the burnout for me.
Okay.
Like,
yeah,
the constant on, and the constant, always some crap going on, constantly. And, and avoiding that, and especially with the way Twitter's been, and with the way the communities in Twitter have just been getting more and more toxic.
Especially since Musk took it over.
Yeah.
It has deteriorated somewhat, which makes me very sad, because that is how I have made quite a few friends through the writing community, through Twitter.
Yeah. I mean,
like yourself and Solosia included. And it saddens me that what was essentially like the world's market square, the world's kind of public stage has changed to a point that it's like not nice anymore, not fun.
Yeah, and even like, this is kind of one of the things that causes the burnout stress for me for that, is I see people that I used to enjoy interacting with becoming the kind of people that I don't want to interact with, because they're desperate for engagement.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm going to be talking to, I believe, Alexis Static, another author who is also a Twitch streamer.
Okay, yeah.
And we're going to be discussing social media and streaming and kind of,
pros and cons.
All that kind of stuff. Like, I get burned out on the community because I'm just so disappointed in what it's become now. And so avoiding that, getting my eggs out of that basket as much as I possibly can, has been a huge change for me.
I think one thing that would help you in that, because it had helped me, is moving your community offline as well. So like I was talking about how I quit the podcast before, and it's funny because like some people have been like, oh, so it failed, like it's gone. And I'm like, no, it was a successful podcast.
You had a very successful podcast.
Yeah, I was really, really happy with it. I mean, I had New York Times bestsellers on. I'm still, even though I haven't released an episode since November 2021.
Oh wow.
So it's been a long time, and I'm still getting emails from publishing houses of all kinds, including Penguin, to be like, "Hey, here's our marketing pitch for our guest. Would you please?" And what I've been doing is, I have been like, "Sorry, I'm not doing it anymore. You can take me off your list. However, can I recommend?" And I'll recommend a podcast that I know is doing interviews. And I'll say, reach out. But anyway, sorry, that was a sidebar. But like, one way to avoid the social media burnout for me was to take the community I'd become friends with, and move them off the spaces that I had become friends with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, moving them from the ballroom into the parlor.
Yeah. Except it was moving them from Twitter into meeting them in real life. So like, your future guest, she's gonna love the name drops. Eve Dixon Rule. Like, I've met up with her in person 2 or 3 times now, and we have another mutual friend who is an author and an editor, Stephen Black.
Yep, I know Stephen. Yeah.
He drives down from Belfast to Dublin and meets up with us sometimes as well. So it's just, that's what I've been focusing on doing. And it's so much nicer because it makes the community that you build so much more real. And I don't mean in the like, you know, you can shake their hand, give them a hug, realize that they're taller than you thought. I mean,
that wouldn't happen if you met me, I promise.
That's one of my favorite things of meeting people I had interviewed on Storyteller, was to be like, "Oh, I'm taller. I thought you were."
Yeah, I'm. Hold on here. I'll get this figured out. You can continue talking. Just talk amongst yourself.
Are you measuring yourself, or you're converting feet? I know feet and inches.
I know, but I wanna say this in proper. I want to be obnoxious.
Real measurements.
Yeah. I'm 10 stone. I know that.
Okay, but you know it in kg? No. He might.
72.
Okay, very good. Well,
actually, no, I'm not 10 stone, because stone is 14 pounds. So I'm roughly 11 stone.
Okay.
So about 72 kilograms. And the only reason I know that is, the only reason I'm even close is because I accidentally hit the button on my scale and it switched to kilograms and scared the crap out of me.
Oh, that's very good. Oh, actually, I have a very funny sidebar on that for you.
Another one? Oh, no.
Oh, listen, it's Punks in the Library. If we're going to be punks, we're not going to follow the rules all the time.
What rules?
What rules, man?
What rules, man?
I was working one summer with autistic children, and there was one boy who it was the hottest summer Ireland had in a long time. Like we were like close to 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in American, but hot.
80 roughly. Yeah. Give or take, 70 or 80.
Which some of your American listeners will be like, only 80, but like Ireland, it's always raining, so it will be very humid as well.
80 in Colorado is like, I'll wear jeans outside. But
yeah, no, that could not happen here.
80 in Louisiana, I'm not even putting a shirt on. So I understand.
Yeah.
There's just no point in showering because you're going to be wet as soon as you get out.
Yeah, exactly. So this poor boy, he just had an issue with he always wanted to wear his blue jacket, which was a proper winter rain jacket, and zipped all the way up to like under his chin, and you could see that he was suffering, but he was like, no, it's not hot enough. So I said to him, how hot does it have to be for you to take off the jacket so that you're cooler and more comfortable like the rest of us? And he looked at me and went, it has to be over 35. I was like, okay, perfect. So I took my phone, and when he wasn't looking, I switched from Celsius to Fahrenheit. And I was like, look! And it was like 70 something degrees, maybe more. And he just went, what? But we should all be dead! He took the jacket off, and then he was really comfortable, and then he enjoyed the rest of the it wasn't a summer camp, but we called it a summer camp to make him feel like it was okay. He enjoyed the rest of the camp then, because he was like, oh, I'm relaxed, I'm cool now. And,
I can actually enjoy it. I have very similar things with clothes, not to that extent, but Like I'm the kind of I always have to cut the tags out.
Oh yeah,
There are certain brands of t-shirt I won't wear because the material doesn't feel right against my skin. So I understand that, but I was also like, I'm lucky in that mine is not that severe.
yeah.
So
But also,
anyway,
he's a child. He'll
yeah,
figure it
yeah,
out.
exactly.
Oh,
Anyway,
anyway,
burnout.
burnout. Well, there's another thing. Like, I mean, like you get burnout from so many different sources. I mean, you know, there's burnout. Creatives have burnout, but those who are listening that are not necessarily creative or don't consider themselves creative, which you are,
Yeah,
like you can get burnout from everything. And
yeah,
I think the one thing we're kind of getting here, considering we're talking about weights and measures, is balance. You have to balance the things that energize you and the things that drain you.
yeah. And you have to recognize, like I didn't, you have to recognize when you're getting close to that edge before you get there. I mean, and this is kind of surprising that I didn't do this because I'm such a proponent of it with, my autism and with my bipolar disorder, is recognizing what's coming before it gets there.
Yeah,
Like seeing the signs in yourself of, okay, there's a depressive episode coming. I can already tell. I can already feel it. So I need to be prepared for that. Or there's a manic episode coming. I need to be prepared for that. And in some cases, so do the people around me. Or I'm close to, having what I know this isn't the proper term for it, but what I call a freak out, which is the overstimulation effect that a lot of people with
yeah.
autism suffer from. And burnout is basically
Meltdowns, I
that.
think, as well as
A meltdown. Yeah.
yeah.
I come from a different generation, so when I was a kid and I did it, it was a freak out.
Yeah,
I think burnout is basically the same thing, but it's much more insidious because it grows so slowly.
yeah.
It's like black
And
mold.
like, what I think is interesting, because when you started saying that, I thought you were going to say something else. That you were saying to recognize, to use your bipolar as an example, to recognize the signs of a depressive episode or a manic episode oncoming, to recognize the build up towards a meltdown, a freak out, whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought you were going to say to recognize when something that was once energizing becomes draining, because that's what was happening to you.
Too.
You were hopping over and back between all these projects because you were very passionate about them, and yeah, they were energizing in a way, but because you weren't doing something that was purely for yourself and purely for Zen reasons, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it wasn't. I was chasing a high that I couldn't get because I had poisoned my own booze.
Exactly.
And that's the weirdest metaphor I think I've ever used.
But we got there.
Analogy.
Kind of works.
But, I mean, it's absolutely true. Like, because I took the joy out of the things I enjoyed.
Yeah.
And I was still trying to enjoy them and expecting them to give me that joy.
Wait. Take the word joy out of enjoy and you get annoy instead.
Oh, good Lord. That's true.
I'm sorry. I'm after spending 10 months teaching 5 and 6-year-olds. So my...
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. That was a good one. That's right at my level of humor, man. You're right there.
You'd love my classroom.
I wouldn't be able to understand a single word anybody said. Little kids and Irish accents, I'd be all over the place.
Yeah, and speaking Irish.
And
speaking Irish.
Yeah, that would actually be the biggest issue for me. But yeah, it's because I wasn't getting any joy out of it, or because I was limiting the amount of joy I got out of it because of the stress I was putting on it.
Yeah, because you're putting yourself under pressure.
I wasn't realizing, I was refusing to recognize the burnout.
Yeah.
It was, I'm fine. This is fun. I'm enjoying it. I basically gave myself Stockholm syndrome about myself. And, not to make a joke out of that, because, I put myself in an abusive relationship with myself over something that I was supposed to be enjoying.
Yeah.
You have to. Like,
but I was the same with the podcast, though. And I love doing it, and I still love doing it. And there are occasions where I'll come across somebody, because like Story of a Storyteller was a little bit different from your typical writing show, because I wasn't like,
It was.
pitch me your book, and it wasn't like your show as well, this show, where it's two writers talking about a writing related topic. My show was born out of my exceptional nosiness, and it was, you know,
Yeah, I call it curiosity. It sounds better.
but it was nosiness.
It's nosiness, yeah.
'Cause- so like it was essentially, yeah, we're not going to talk about your books. We're going to talk about you, and I want to know how did the baby Nick, who was born 20, 30, 40, 50, stop me when I'm right, years ago.
You were closer with 40.
I'm joking. Like that, the baby Nick, how does that become the man who is telling stories for a living? And I still have that. Like, I'm reading a lot of kids' books now because I'm leaning more into writing for children. And like even the book I was reading before we started recording, like the one thing I want to do right now more than anything is bring the podcast back just to have a chance to talk to him for an hour and like learn.
Yeah, how did you get here?
Yeah, like tell me about this and where'd you get the idea and why did you do this and why did you do that? And yeah.
What's interesting is I think a lot of people have that interest. Like, how did this person, like in my case, this guy from a upper middle class family in Buffalo, New York, end up a lit punk in Denver, and with this voice and this attitude, how did I manage 7 years of college and not learn anything? Let's start with that. Well, let's. I think that one's pretty.
That's a different episode.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty explanatory if I include the fact that I spent 7 years in college and don't have a degree. So, I mean, obviously, I didn't learn anything. I think a lot of people are interested in that. How like you said, how does baby Nick become this person? And so, your podcast was awesome. I listened to it a lot.
But this is the thing, like I love it so much, but I have to think you kind of have to prioritize certain things. So like the first thing, which we do this as humans, we do this all the time without realizing it. Like step one, well, I have to sleep. So there's 8. Yeah. Well, it's never 8, but like there's like 8-ish hours out of my 24 gone. I have to cook and eat or order and eat or go out and eat. There's another 2 hours spread out over the whole day gone. So now we're down to 14. If you're somebody who has a full-time day job, there's some more hours gone. So like your hours are so precious. Right. So like I would absolutely love to pick Storyteller up again. But when my main way to have a living is by having a full-time day job, then I just can't. The dream would be, because teachers are very lucky in Ireland, we can take a career break where...
Oh yeah, like a sabbatical?
Sabbatical. So we leave our job. We're not paid for the year, but we apply for it. If the Board of Management gives it, we leave for the year. And when we want to come back in the next school year, the job is there waiting for you again.
Right. So they basically just hold your position for you.
Yeah. And then somebody comes in and works for the year in your position. But we also have a system called the job share, which is amazing.
Okay.
So if there's 2 teachers in the one school, or 2 teachers in 2 neighboring schools want to do job share, basically, like let's say Nick, you and I were doing job share. I work every Monday, Tuesday. You work every Thursday, Friday, and we alternate the Wednesday.
Oh, that's an interesting system.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And what's even more amazing is your pay only goes down to 60%. Instead of what you would imagine would be the 50. Like for me, the dream is to get to a position where I have 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 kids' books traditionally published. I have an income-ish coming from that.
Right.
Then I do the job share, and then that frees me up to write more, but also maybe bring the podcast back. Like that.
Right, because you have more time.
Exactly.
And one of my biggest things that I tell people is time is the only thing you can never get back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can always make more money. You can always, whatever else you have to budget, you can always find a way to find more of it or replenish what you've used.
Yeah.
But you cannot do that with time.
Yeah.
And that's been brought into stark focus with me with Celosia's health issues the past few months. That, you know, we're not getting that time back.
Yeah.
There's no way. We can't reclaim it.
But you can by focusing on doing, like, you can by going, you know what, here's the reset button. Now let's use our time much better from now on. And I look at that as reclaiming the time you've lost. Because
okay, I see that.
Like, for those listening, my partner and Celosia actually experienced the same health issue, but it happened to him 10 years ago, this September actually. So I know exactly what you're talking about, but that's what we've done. Is like we're you guys 10 years in the future and a different country and different
and and actually Conor was very kind early on in this whole health thing to offer to get us in touch with he and his partner to kind of give us an idea of all the stuff the doctors don't tell you about going forward.
Yeah.
And we still need to set that call up. But I'd like to talk a little bit about like the fallout from burnout and maybe make that the last topic for the show, because I think we're over 45 at this point.
I'd say we're getting there.
Because I forgot to start a timer on top of it. How unprofessional of me. I can edit it down. There's a lot of this that doesn't have to go out live. But yeah, I'd like to talk about the fallout. Like, what happens when you do burnout? And because I've done it before, not this time, luckily, but I've done it before, and it was fairly catastrophic, honestly.
Well, I think that's another thing. It's different for everybody. Like, what burns you out is different. What the burned out version of you looks like is different. And I think it's just recognizing it. For me, it was, how can I put this? I felt like the entire world had turned gray. Like all the color drained out of it. Yeah, and it was like you with your sunglasses. Like it was someone put sunglasses over me, and now everything was like monotone. I was like, oh, what? And it was a thing of, I realized I haven't had, like, I remember this exact person I interviewed. It was someone who their publicist had got in touch with me, and I had interviewed a few people like that. But what I generally did was I would find them on social media and interact with them a little bit myself before. And this is the first guest I didn't do that. And this guest clearly hadn't listened to my show, clearly didn't read the premise that, listen, we're not actually this isn't really a book selling moment for you. This is more for your future fans to get to know you. Like, would answer my questions very sternly and had a really interesting childhood, and I wanted to go explore that. And they were like, well, I'd like to talk about my book now. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, we're getting there. Yeah. Like, I'm asking to, and I do always give, like, I mean, you guys were on it, that I do give that, I do bring us to the moment of, and now tell us about what you're doing now and all that. Yeah. That's kind of the end of the arc. Yeah, exactly. It's like a character arc. Yeah. You catch up with the character arc, I guess. But it just, I remember finishing recording that episode, and it was the first time I didn't, like, rush into the other room in our tiny 2-bed apartment to go to my partner, but like, oh my god, I just talked to this person, they're so good. Like, I remember finishing the talk with you and Socia, and you're like, oh my god, the audio was a complete head wreck, but it was so much fun, and we had such a laugh, and Nick said this and Socia said that, right. That's what it was. You enjoyed the conversation. Exactly. And that's, for me, what it was when I realized the thing that was causing me burnout, that the joy had left, and I was now doing it out of habit rather than out of passion. And what's interesting is what you just described, the world going gray and the joy going out of it, that is depression. Yeah, it is. That is absolutely depression.
That it may be low grade depression, but when I go into a depressive episode, that is what it is. There is no joy, there is no wonder,
Mm.
there is nothing. You are just there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes that doesn't even feel real.
Yeah.
Real. Yeah, I speak professionally.
No, you edit professionally.
Yeah, I edit professionally. Yeah, exactly. Man, you should see the Lantern News editing process, because I just do it as one long recording.
Yeah.
I don't do cuts
Yeah.
while I'm recording, and oh my God,
A lot.
that's a mother. But yeah, for me, when it really hit me, I was lucky, over the past few months that I had so much to do that the burnout didn't really catch me.
Yeah.
And I was also very lucky that I had very supportive people, you included, around me to say, hey, take a deep breath and a nap.
Yeah.
Like take a deep breath, eat something, and take a nap. Other people can cover things for you.
But I do remember
If
one
you're that worried
specific.
about it, leave your phone on.
I do remember one specific bit of advice I gave you, because the two of us are in an unusual situation of being the partner of someone who has had a massive health crisis. And I remember the thing I specifically gave you, the only advice I think I really gave you was, you have to prioritize you sometimes, because
Yeah.
if you're the support structure for her and you crumble, then you both crumble.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you actually told me, I remember when you first contacted me, like privately, one of the things you told me was, if you want to talk about how you're doing and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
That wasn't emotion. That was something in my throat. But if you want, I don't have emotions. But no, you actually said, if you want to talk to somebody about how you're feeling and not feel guilty about it, let me know.
Yeah.
And I ended up not taking you up on that, because I was lucky enough to have other people, kind of closer, like family members and stuff like that, who like initiated those conversations with me.
Yeah.
And kind of wouldn't let me not talk about it.
Yeah.
Like wouldn't let me bottle it up. So yeah, it was great advice, and I did take it
Good.
a lot. But for me, when I crashed, this was many, many years ago. I started writing, like, I had an agent at 16.
Jesus, that was young.
Like, I had a publishing contract at 16. And I mean, I was doing other things at that time. I was full-time in school. I, was playing music. I, had a fairly normal teenage life, but I also had this thing and the pressure of that thing. And I ended up ditching both the agent and the contract. And there's a train going by, because of course. That's going to be a fun one in the edit. At least I didn't blow the horn this time. So, I had all this stuff, and I ended up, because of like, this is part of the reason that I still have a little bit of a bee in my bonnet about traditional publishing. I'm not going to go into that story right now.
Yeah.
But I ended up ditching the publishing contract, ditching the agent, and because I had been writing about 5,000 words a day
Jesus.
since I was 11 years old.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And at 11, I was doing that. And nobody was forcing me to do this. This wasn't like, force your kids into ballet class and make them constantly practice. This was just me doing this to myself. When I turned 18, I ditched the contract, I ditched the agent, and I ditched writing.
Yeah.
For 10 years.
Yeah.
I didn't start writing again until I was in my late 20s. I spent my 20s not realizing how much damage I had done to myself when I was a kid. And the real stress of it, I mean, when you're 11, 12 years old, there's not a whole lot of stress there.
No.
Nobody was pushing me. Everybody was like, "Oh, that's sweet. He's writing." Okay. But, got a publishing deal. Publisher started saying, "This book is really good. I would like you to rewrite the entire thing, and also can we have 4 more?
Yeah.
And how soon can you get those to us? We would really, really like those. Do you have time to do it next week?"
Yeah.
Like, and I think part of the reason for that was they knew that they were doing slash and burn. Get as much out of me as they could before the hammer dropped, or before the shoe fell, or the penny dropped. That's what I was going for.
I understood.
And so between like 16 and 18, I was writing. I'd get home from school, hang out with my friends for a while, or do homework or whatever, and write until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Every day. On weekends, I would write from about 7 a.m. until about 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then do whatever. I actually damaged my hands as a teenager. Permanent damage to my hands writing. And I thought it was perfectly fine because on top of everything else, I was like 17, 18. I thought I was indestructible. I damaged my vision doing it.
Yeah.
I gave myself astigmatisms in both of my eyes doing that. I got so burned out and I didn't recognize the burnout. And like, I dealt with the fallout of it for 10 years. Because on top of everything else, that's when my manic depression started to rear its head. So on top of basically having PTSD from writing, I had this other crap going on in my head that I didn't understand. And, coming from the culture I came from and the time I was dealing with this, it wasn't as accepted to go talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
This was the 90s. And granted, it was far more accepted in the 90s than it would have been in the 80s.
But it's far more accepted now, 30 years later.
Significantly. Yeah. The fallout from that was me quitting writing for a decade and drinking too much, not taking care of myself, making terrible choices about who I was spending my time with. And it all stemmed from being burned out at 18.
Yeah. Which shows you like the complete, like the power that burnout has. And you really do have to kind of look out for it.
Yeah, it can.
I feel like we're completely bumming out.
I hope not. I really hope not. But I mean, part of the reason that we're doing this show the way we're doing it is to talk about the stuff that gets swept under the rug, that gets ignored in social media communities. People go, "Oh, I don't want to bum people out, so I'm not going to talk about the fact that I'm so burned out that I don't think I'm ever going to pick up a pen again."
Yeah.
But it happens. And it can happen to any one of us. I mean, it's happened to both of us, and we come from very different places.
Oh, very different places, very different backgrounds, very different personalities. Like, which only just goes to show that it does happen to everybody. Not that it can, it does.
And if you're not cognizant of it, hey, I used a big word in my podcast. But if you're not cognizant of it, if you're not aware, and you don't, don't be afraid of it, but be aware that it can happen and it will happen if you don't take steps to mitigate it. And it can end your career. It can screw your head up. That's part of the reason that I want to talk about this kind of stuff, is because I've been in this game, in excluding that 10-year period, I've been in this game literally my entire adult life. I have seen brilliant writers ruin themselves before they even managed to get published because nobody stopped them and said, watch out for this stuff. Watch out for these kinds of people. Watch out how hard you're pushing yourself. Kind of my rule, and I got this from a physical therapist after I had screwed up my shoulder. The physical therapist told me, whatever you think you can do 80% of that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Hold yourself back on purpose, because if you don't, you'll go all
exactly.
out.
And because I was saying, what do I have to do to not have this happen again? Because I tore my rotator cuff. So, and I actually
Yeah.
still have limited mobility in that arm because of it. And I said, how do I keep this from happening again? And he said, Nick, you are the kind of person who will do something until you fall down. And he saw that from me in therapy, that I will push until the pain is excruciating. He said, whatever you think you can do 80% of that. And that's what you can do without getting hurt.
I suppose that's the thing. It's like, the very tired phrase, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
You have to pace yourself. You have to if you do 80%, you'll be able to go much longer than if you do 100% all the time.
And I see writers, luckily it's far less prevalent now than it was when I was coming up. The kind of like mental picture people have of a writer as being obsessive and always being writing.
The tortured artist. The tortured broken
and
artist.
Luckily that is far less prevalent an idea now. Some people still peddle it. It's crap. It's not real. Like everybody thinks of Byron as a tortured artist. Byron was not a tortured artist. Byron was a multimillionaire who had women all over him and only wore pants once and just got new pants and, fought in the Greek Civil War and swam the Hellespont. This dude was not a tortured artist, bent over with his plume writing poems. He was making more per stanza than my last job paid me per month. And he was rich to start with.
I know.
But anyway, that's my screed about Lord Byron. But no, the idea of the tortured artist, thankfully, it's dying away. And I think that's one thing I'll say about social media is we as creators can be far more visible now. And people can see what kind of people we really are. And people who are coming up, kind of the next generation, see that we're not sitting there with our head in our hands, usually. It does happen.
We are, but we just don't do it all day.
Like we are, our torture is far more limited than the image that got peddled to people. We tend to be fairly well adjusted, most of us. Everybody has problems, but the problems we have a lot of them come from the burnout, come from the stress we put ourselves under. And it's not an easily avoidable thing. Like you said, it will happen to everyone. Everybody will have to stop and walk away. The trick is to stop and walk away at the end of the day,
Yeah, exactly.
And instead of at the end of the decade.
Or worse, at
the end of you, which, there's several writers have gone that route too,
Listen, it's a thing that we could... Like I feel like this is nearly an endless topic, but I think the most important thing anyone listening needs to know is if any of these things are ringing true for you and you're hearing, oh no, like Conor said about the world's going grey and recognizing Nick's thing of I keep fresh by jumping from one project to the next and keep going in a circle.
Chasing a high.
Like maybe you're burned out and you don't realize it. So my number one thing I would say before we wrap up is the one thing you should definitely do is do something that has nothing to do with your creative side. So like for me, that is taking my dog, going outside, blaring ridiculous music in my headphones, and while I'm walking, playing Pokemon Go, because I'm not going to write about that. I mean, I could, but it wouldn't be good or interesting.
What's interesting, and this is something that basically nobody knows about me, I build models. Yeah, like Gundams. My brother got me one for Christmas this year, actually. Got me started on it. And I'm working on this model that has 500 or 600 parts, and it's 6 inches tall. Yeah. And
that would give me burnout.
Well, that's the other thing. I do it for like an hour and then I stop wherever I am. And it has nothing to do with writing. I can't even think about writing while I'm doing it because I'm thinking about picking up tiny little like spurs and connectors with tweezers and putting them in place. Stickers that I had to buy a special pair of glasses to see.
Are those like weird
no.
square ones?
I'm not that far. I don't have the I actually do have a set of those, but
I'm waiting for that.
I actually had to buy cheaters because my eyes have gotten worse. So I got cheaters.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing I'd say is, if anything we're saying is ringing true, talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
I would suggest don't talk to another writer about it. Because
Yeah. Because if they haven't experienced
or
burnout,
if they're not recognizing their own,
that's what I mean. Yeah,
across
yeah,
the board, we are not psychologists. There are people who are actually psychologists.
They're good to talk to in general.
Yeah, they're good to talk to in general, but if you're a writer or a creative and you're recognizing any of the stuff we've talked about in yourself, even if you're not burned out, even if you're just saying, "Oh yeah, I kind of do that too." The best way to avoid getting burned out or burning out as badly is to build habits like you were just saying about going out and playing with your dog and walking your dog. Build habits ahead of time that help you mitigate the burnout. Because I didn't, and it damn near broke me, and it's damn near broken me a couple of times, and now I have better habits. Okay, I think we're gonna end it there. That's a bright and shiny note to end the show on.
What a hefty episode.
First episode I'm recording back, and we decided to just go straight dark with it.
Why not? Why not?
But no, I think, it's a good topic to talk about, and I think it needs to be discussed more. And hopefully, even if people disagree with us, hopefully this will engender other people having conversations about it.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Like that's one thing. The two of us are speaking as friends who have experienced something that was very similar but completely different at the same time.
Yeah.
And, everyone's experience with burnout is different, but I think the thing that rings true for everyone is avoid it.
Yeah. Or mitigate it. Sometimes it can't be avoided, but you can mitigate the consequences of it. So Thank you very much for coming on, Conor.
We'll
have to do this again.
Joy.
We'll have to do this
Indeed.
again. I'm somehow slipping into a bit of a very stereotypical Irish accent now. I haven't done it all episodes, so I figured I'll do it now.
That doesn't sound like any county in Ireland.
It sounds like somebody stole me Lucky Charms, is what it is.
Yeah, it does.
That's I believe Dara O'Brien calls it Irish.
Yeah, it's OIR, right?
OIR, yeah. Oh, I've got a bit of an Irish accent. Irish.
Yeah, I can't even do that accent. This is an Irish accent. Listen to me.
I've wanted to learn how to do a proper Irish accent for a very long time, but I'm really afraid it'll ruin my terrible Irish accent, which is the funny one. So, and that one's funny, I can go yo and do a shovel kick,
Sure. Anyway, Nick, thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. And we will do this again sometime. Definitely.
Indeed.
And hopefully it'll go smoother.
At least the beginning of it.
All right, time to do the outro. All right. Thank you guys all for listening today, and thank you for coming out. Thank you for hanging out. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Punks in the Library is produced by Celicia Crane and NJ Sullivan and is a Lantern Audio Works production. To support this show, go to patreon.com/Lantern Audio Works. To check out all our shows, go to lanternaudioworks.com.